Hello, I'm Andrew Thomas, and you're very welcome to this reflection session with Leigh Brown. If you're already using the Rainbow Map, then this and other reflection sessions will hopefully generate new insights and ideas for your own practice in terms of how you integrate this versatile tool. If you're new to the Rainbow Map, then these sessions are intended to help you further your understanding of this tool and if and how it might be of use to you and your clients. For the therapists sharing their experience with us, my hope is that the session is both enjoyable and an opportunity to take a little time out to reflect on the role the Rainbow Map plays in their work and perhaps even open up new insights and ideas that might be useful afterwards. Leigh is based in Lymington, a town on the south coast of England, and I'm very happy and very grateful to her for spending some time with us. And I'd better stop now before my brain and my mouth fall out of sync. So I'm going to hand over to Leigh to introduce herself. Over to you, Leigh.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for inviting me to participate in your day or your website. I started training 1996, so I've been kind of working as a therapist in various locations and in different modalities during that time, largely relationships, sex and relationships when I started, working in an army environment at that point, and moving into trauma work, EMDR, in the last 12 years, and now doing, sort of combining all of those and the Rainbow Map in my current work. I guess I'm an integrative therapist. I use a number of different tools to help me and try and sort of pitch whatever I'm using to the clients in front of me, and have found the Rainbow Map's actually particularly helpful with some of the groups. And so that's really where I am at the moment.
Thank you, Leigh. I wonder if you could share with us why you started to integrate the Rainbow Map into your work.
And I'm always sort of, if I feel as if something's going to work, I need to start using it straight away. I can't just put something away and think, oh, I'll think about that and then use it. And I found that this is actually a sort of instant thing that I thought, yeah, this is going to be really useful. I liked the fact that it was colorful. And so I think I probably started using it almost immediately once you'd given me the manual, and got a whole load of the rainbow sheets sort of printed out. You then change the rainbow sheets, so those are now useless.
Sorry about that. So, what sort of clients and issues do you typically use the Rainbow Map for?
Well, I know that I could use it in groups. My group workers only tends to be with partners of sex addicts or people with compulsive sexual behaviors, and so I've got an idea that if I do another group, I will probably try and integrate it into that, because I think it'd be really helpful. I use it with individuals with that have also had that experience, and it seems to really help them, because very often they're living at very extremes of high emotion or despair. So it sort of works very well as a sort of model to kind of that they can navigate their way through, and also where we're aiming for them to be, or some of the time, in that middle area.
How well do you find it integrates with the EMDR side of your work?
Yes, I think the Rainbow Map sits very comfortably with EMDR. EMDR being more sort of about what you're noticing in the body, based on, you will disagree with that with your new theory, but based on the fact that the trauma is somehow dysfunctionally being stored. And the body, if you ever read Bessel van der Kolk's book, the body holds the score. And that seems to be very true. And I mean, I rely a lot on sort of explanations of the polyvagal nervous system, which again, I think kind of, is a really good match with the Rainbow Map. And you can sort of like use that in some psychoeducation way with clients when you're trying to explain, rather than a whole load of words. Sometimes it's really easy for people to see, you know, the hyper aroused being in the red and your hyper arousal being right down there in the purple of your map. So yeah, it's I may not use it exactly as you taught, in terms of, you know, maybe spending a lot of time just on the map, but it seems to integrate very well with even it just being used intermittently, and maybe there's something will trigger another kind of, oh, okay, well, let's look, where would you be on this map here? And then people can immediately get it. And so yeah, I've used it a lot with the MDR.
Well, you know, that's music to my ears when you say you're not using it in the way I trained it, you know, because I trained the 3-course dinner version, but as I say repeatedly and have done on the workshop, it's how it best fits into your modality. There's no, as I've learned, no one way of using it, the rainbow map, in any way, shape or form. I was wondering how the rainbow map integrates into the psychosexual side of your work.
I think it can do. The type of, I mean, again, sometimes you're seeing people who are in quite a high state of anxiety, and like if we take something like rapid ejaculation, for example, so they might be in a really high state of anxiety about that problem, and if they can understand that the solution partly lies in them being able to get out of that and into a state of mind where they're sort of like more calm and they're not sort of like in fight or flight mode, then or in despair in the other one, in the freeze side, then it's going to be much easier for them to manage actually having success with a partner. So it can be useful in sort of a snapshot, if you like. So if you sort of went through the system of, so when you're beginning to think this is not going to work, or this is all happening too fast, where would you see yourself on the map? Well, they're immediately going to go up, but then just as soon as they've gone up, they've shot back down again. So it's that, you do the timing of the cycle and how long it takes, and they totally get that. And they can see that they've really got to slow down. They've got to really try and manage that, what the body's feeling, rather than their self, that belief that, what do they call it? Self-fulfilled prophecy that they're going to fail. So it's kind of like getting them to try and rethink.
Well, that's really interesting. Thank you. That's really interesting. And what are your reflections on how you typically introduce the rainbow map or anything connected to it with your clients? I mean, I suppose I suppose the question is when and how do you typically introduce it? Or maybe there isn't a typical.
Well, I think it's normally quite spontaneous. I'm just trying to see where I've got it, because I normally have it. I've got a sort of little pile of things, which of course I can't find at the moment. Oh, here they are. Of things that I use a lot. And so I normally keep these things as their little aids. So one of the things I've got is your map.
Yeah.
And so if there's a sort of, like, for example, if there's, like, say, a couple who have a lot of conflict and we're kind of going around the same old, then it can be really helpful for say, hey, come on, let's try and look at this through a different way. And then sort of like for both of them to map out how they are in their, when they're in the getting into an argument or they're feeling very defensive, and you do one and the other person is kind of forced to listen. So that's good, but they're not really getting into defending. And then they get their chance, and that can be mapped either on a separate sheet or on the same one. Quite often would do it on the same sheet, but not about everything in their nervous, just that particular problem that they're having. And then what I find is that they'll often see that as one of them is getting more and more hyper and going into that sort of either angry or overwhelmed state, the other one is kind of going down in a spiral into the, here we go again, oh God. And we know that in relationships, men are much more conflict averse, they will avoid it if they can, than women. Women can tolerate a lot of relationship turmoil far better than men. And they go into their talk, want to talk about it, want to talk about the problem. And the men just want to go and dig a hole somewhere and bury themselves. And when they both see how far apart they are, when they're actually trying to find a solution to something, it's really helpful for them to think, so what could you do differently? How would you need to feel in order for you both to be a little bit nearer? Or what can you do to help? How could you help the other person, by maybe not pushing them, if you like, over the edge or down the hill?
So no typical time in therapy. It could be just when it
Anytime.
fits. Yeah. I mean, I've heard some therapists use it or I've heard of one therapist uses it right at the beginning all the time as an information collection tool. But I suppose when I reflect it depends on where the client is and what's going on, and then you may introduce it.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's
you were
also
going to say
that
something.
I would sort of say probably the expectation. The very first session, you're kind of gathering information from them and trying to work out. But there's always a point where some type of psychoeducation about how you're going to work with them or what you're going to do. So at that stage, I might just flag it up that at some point we'll be looking at this because it's probably going to be relevant. But I won't go into a lot of detail then. But if somebody's come on their own, and like an individual who's, has presenting with extremely high anxiety, constantly bursting into tears, keeps getting sent home from work, can't, and so yes, I know there's a story there that I've got to find out, but actually just managing her anxiety would be sort of pretty near the top, because she's not going to take anything in the session if she's like that. So using it then right at the beginning can be really helpful, just to say, so let's look at what's going on now, and then using the rainbow map, probably in a little bit more that you taught, but sort of like, so what is your thinking about that? What's going on in your body? All of that.
Training over 500 in the last 18 months to 2 years, to hear you talk like that, I mean, I've just learned so much about it, really. I mean, the other point, when you introduce it, do you say this really handsome British bloke developed it?
Oh, I've got photographs of you that I give out to everybody at the end of the session.
Glamour shots. Okay, thank you. They must be heavily processed. So, this question is, what do you experience? I mean, what do you experience as a therapist working with the rainbow map? And I suppose connected with that is, and how does it integrate with your central modality or modalities?
Well, I think it's probably because it uses color that I kind of put it more into a sort of like art therapy type of tool, in that you're often sort of trying to get under the radar of the normal sort of defenses that you'd have about people getting in, being vulnerable about their feelings. And everybody knows what a rainbow is, even more so since COVID and the National Health Service. But we all know what a rainbow is, and it's got quite a happy association, I think, with most people. So it's a sort of easily, it's not like it's some sort of strange picture that they're having to sort of accommodate. It's something that's quite familiar, but also it makes sense then to kind of look at it in that way, and very quickly people see it, and it's lucky the colors are how they are, because it does sort of fit in pretty well with the two sides. Can't remember what else you asked me.
Well, it's about what's going on for you when you're working with the rainbow map. If anything, I mean, maybe that's a leading question, and maybe there isn't, but
no.
And how does it? And how does that then integrate?
It's a little bit, if you like, it's a little bit like EMDR, where there's some talk involved in it, but actually some of the processing that's going on is silent. So it doesn't need words to explain. Once they're kind of, beginning to notice what happens, and when this particular event is, or this particular feeling, and what happens when it isn't. It's almost like they get the message silently, if you know what I mean. You don't have to kind of say it out loud, really. They've got it.
So what do you experience as a therapist working with the rainbow map? And I suppose connected with that is, how does it integrate with your central modalities or modality? Because I suppose we're all thinking as we work with clients, how does this connect with theory, or how we've been trained, and also what's going on within us as we're working with particular tools or techniques. I'm just wondering if you might want to share any reflections around those areas.
Well, I think it's a handy thing to have in your equivalent of a toolbox, because it's something that you can be using either. Well, I find that it gives me a sense of satisfaction just to be able to think, this might really make it crystal clear what's happening. So I can sort of present it in such a way that it's kind of like, take it away with you, think about it, look at it, add things, whatever you want. As a therapist, it's just a useful thing to have, in the same way as I have diagrams of boundaries, and my own little thing about how the brain and heart are connected, and all of that sort of thing, the 3 areas of the brain. So it sort of just fits into, that's probably the more psychoeducation. It's kind of quite, I suppose it's comforting to know that I've got something that I know will work most of the time.
And just, what are your sort of criteria? Because we're all going on training and reading stuff. I mean, for you personally, what are the sort of criteria maybe that mean that you'll use something or it won't get used? I mean, do you have a sort of view on, crystallized view on that, or maybe it doesn't work like that for you?
Well, if you're going on a training, specifically like something like this, where you're actually able to integrate it into your own working style. It's pretty much the same as EMDR. It works in the same way, as you can use it within your own modality, and find your own way of working with it. And as I said before, I think the rainbow map complements it very well. So I suppose it makes me more confident that I've got, things that I think will really work with people. Because if I don't believe it will work, and I think this is really common, you have to really believe yourself that what you're describing or telling somebody that you're going to use is actually worth them putting the effort in. If you're sort of half-hearted about it or a bit nervous, I think you need to go and practice on your members of your family or whatever it is, until you just feel as if, you really want to share this with people, because it's going to really help them in their understanding or appreciation of somebody else's viewpoint.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the final area of reflection, maybe the most important area, is, what do you perceive your clients' experience working with the rainbow map? What, maybe is what they experience initially, or as you're working through it, or subsequently, whatever. I mean, what's your impression? Maybe different client groups experience different things, different age groups. I don't know. Over to you. What's your take on
I
that?
think there's sort of a wide variety there. I think one example would be of somebody who it was almost like a life-changing thing, because having plotted out her mood over the course of her relationship, which was for a number of years, she was quite shocked to see how long she'd spent living in the kind of deep purple side and in despair, with only very short journeys up, normally into the red with another argument or whatever that was going on. And at the end of a particular session, it was like the decision was made for her that she wasn't going to she wasn't going to stay in that relationship anymore. It was kind of like, I've done my time, not doing any more. And with others, I really notice what I like is that when people come back and they might say something like, oh my God, this happened this week. And I went straight into the red. And they then describe everything that they'd noticed because they were now relating it to what they'd covered either the session before or whatever. And it's them sort of saying, yeah, and I thought I've really got to manage this better, and I really got myself down, and I did this and I did this, and you know what, I managed to get in the green, and I was really pleased with myself. And that was just like their explanation of how they were using it in their own lives, not related to the initial problem. And I've had that from quite a few people, and also just being able to say, I just feel a bit blue. And the partner knows what that means.
Yes.
Or they know themselves. And so they've either got a choice, they either sink down into, the mud, or they kind of try and get a step up and not spend so much time there.
And do you notice, I mean, when you first introduce them to it, I suppose you're talking about they start to pick up on the colours and use that as a way of communicating with themselves and their others. Do you notice any sort of migration or any changes as they get more familiar with what this is?
They certainly relate to the trigger kind of idea, which I think some people say that anyway, particularly in, I work with, those compulsive sexual behaviors. And so, what's triggered your behavior, all of that. So they can relate to that concept as well. And again, but they probably never made the link that it's also affecting the way that their body feels. And, so it's kind of helping link up what's going on in the head with what's going on in the body.
And what difference do you think that makes to them? I mean, we all have views on that, or people working in an embodied way. I'm really interested. What's your take on, integrating that connection between emotions and thoughts and the body? What do you think that means to clients?
Well, I think if I just kind of maybe concentrate just on, more traumatized, population, that they are sometimes cut off from their bodies because of dissociation. It's a way of managing that, distress. And the thought that they could link up, the thoughts and everything else that goes in their head and actually be able to tolerate the feelings that they're frightened of that might happen in their bodies, it can be quite a gentle way of saying there's not just one option. You're not necessarily going to go straight here. There are ways of kind of like titrating your introduction to, actually being able to feel something.
Yeah.
So I think is that what you asked?
Yes, I really like the terminology you used there about titration and sort of enabling our clients to focus in on more discrete elements. And I really think it's great to hear you say that.
Yeah, just dealing with a little bit at a time rather than having to deal with the whole thing.
We're being totalized or overwhelmed by your whole experience of yourself.
So it's just like just look at a little, a little chunk, and then you can add another one as you kind of get that sense that you can deal with it.
And do you find that I don't know, we don't know, do you find they start doing their own thing with the rainbow map ever? Do they ever say, oh, well, I did this or that? I don't know the answer to this. We haven't.
Well, I think let's say that you do get some feedback when they are using it in their own way, like when when they're recognizing where they're going, and so they're using that knowledge to be different, which they wouldn't have done if it had just been probably an abstract concept, because they've actually got something they love to take it away with them. I can't tell you the number of people that they say, can I have this? Can I take it away with me?
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, maybe they just like taking things away. I don't know, but they seem to ask for it.
Okay, and the glamour shot of me.
Well, of course, that's, you know, that's premium clients only.
and the and the I many of who've been on the training course, I have told them that my daughter's diagnosed me with comedy Tourette's, which doesn't mean it's funny, but I just say stupid things at times, so I do apologize. But the trigger cycle, any observations about how clients relate to that, or how you relate to that?
I think it's, I suppose it's a little bit more related to specifics. I mean, particularly with, you know, anyone with compulsive behaviors, whether they be sexual or what, that it's quite, I mean, it's quite an interesting discussion when you start going into a little bit deeper about this, you know, how do you get triggered? Why do you get triggered? What happens? And, you know, and also how can you intervene to that cycle? Now, I know a little bit about what you've said, you know, that it's kind of all very much embedded from the infant.
I think you're referring there to the work I'm doing on what I call avoidance theory and also legacy behaviors. There will be modules on those on the website. I just wanted to say how interesting it's been for me to hear you reflect on your experience of integrating the rainbow map. It's been absolutely fascinating. But without any further ado, Leigh, I really again want to thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Thanks for inventing it.
That's really kind of you to say. So really, I'm going to go silent now, and hopefully we'll see any of you guys who've tuned in today on another one of the modules or one of these reflection sessions. So thank you very much for spending time with us.
Bye.